The 2011 Kashgar attacks were a series of knife and bomb attacks in Kashgar, Xinjiang, China on July 30 and 31, 2011. On July 30, two Uyghur men hijacked a truck, killed its driver, and drove into a crowd of pedestrians. They got out of the truck and stabbed 6 people to death and injured 27 others. One of the attackers was killed by the crowd, the other was brought into custody. On July 31, a chain of 2 explosions started a fire at a downtown restaurant. A group of armed Uyghur men killed 2 people inside of the restaurant and 4 people outside, injuring 15 other people. Police shot 5 suspects dead, detained 4, and killed 2 others who initially escaped arrest. The government says the attackers confessed to jihadist motives and membership in the terrorist group East Turkestan Islamic Movement, while an overseas pro-Uyghur independence group says the attackers were frustrated by a lack of options for non-violent anti-government protest. Businesses temporarily closed down and riot police patrolled the city until August 4. Emok acknowledged responsibility for the attack on September 8, as well as for the attack in Hotin earlier that same July. 6 men were given prison or death sentences for their involvement in both attacks later in September. Background: Kashgar is one of the most volatile cities in China, near to the border with Afghanistan and Pakistan, and contains many cultural icons for the Chinese Muslim Uyghur minority. The proximity of the jihadist activity in Afghanistan and Pakistan serve as an inspiration for Uyghur extremists. Han people form about 20% of the population and live apart from the local Uyghurs. Anthropologist Drew Gladney said that in Kashgar, any small incident quickly overheats and boils into something much larger. From 2003 to 2006, a Xinjiang-wide crackdown on extremism reduced the incidence of terrorist attacks, but alienated many Uyghurs and aided extremist recruitment. In the run-up to the 2008 Beijing Olympics in August, 2 Uyghur men killed 16 people in Kashgar with a combination truck collision and stabbing. Because Kashgar lies in a seismic zone, the city is undergoing a $1.1 billion urban renewal plan to replace mud brick structures with new foundations that meet modern standards of earthquake safety and sanitation. Some Uyghurs oppose the renovations, citing the cultural value of the old buildings. Outside investment has fueled the town's economic growth of 20% since the city was designated a special economic zone in 2010. However, many Uyghurs, including the suspects in the 2011 Kashgar attacks, do not have even a primary education, and still more are not proficient in standard Chinese. As a result, unemployment is high and salaries are low even among Uyghurs with university degrees is unfounded. The designated terror group known as the East Turkestan Islamic Movement is a UK-based pan-Islamic group operating in Xinjiang with similar ideals to Al-Qaeda, but with less technological capability. Since explosives are tightly controlled in Xinjiang and in the border regions, the ETM has resorted to knife, pinprick, and vehicular attacks against civilians and security forces to achieve its goals. Chinese HUMINT in Xinjiang is stunted by the Uyghurs' unwillingness to cooperate with police, so state security forces find difficulty in anticipating and planning for terrorist attacks. The 2011 attacks in Kashgar came on the eve of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan and 1 month after Kashgar opened a railway to Hotin, a city that had been the site of violence on July 18. Attacks. First day at 10:30 p.m. on July 30, 2 car bombs exploded prematurely, one in a parked minivan, another on a street lined with restaurants. 3 bystanders immediately died from the blasts, as well as the driver of the minivan. 2 suspects fled the scene. Injured people were carried out of restaurants on stretchers and police cordoned off the area. 5 miles from the site of the explosions at 11:45 p.m., 2 armed Uyghur men hijacked a blue truck waiting at a traffic light by stabbing its driver to death. According to the Hong Kong-based Ming Pao, the two hijackers were the same suspects who fled the earlier explosion. With control of the truck, they drove into a crowded sidewalk lined with food stalls, jumped out, and started stabbing pedestrians. Eventually the crowd overpowered the attackers, beating one of them to death before police detained the other. 27 people emerged alive with injuries, while 8 victims died. A tourist operator in Kashgar told The Hindu that the police closed off several areas of the city, although residents said that the atmosphere in the city immediately afterwards was calm. Second day at 4:30 p.m. on the following day, a group of 12 Uyghur men armed with guns and knives threw explosives into busy Kashgar Panji restaurant, causing a fire. The targeted restaurant was located at the end of Gourmet Food Street, a crowded street lined with restaurants and shops that are popular with Han people. As restaurant-goers tried to flee into the street, the assailants hacked at them with knives, leaving pools of blood and overturned tables in their wake. The restaurant owner, a waiter and 4 patrons were killed. 12 other Han people suffered injuries. Firefighters arrived to put out the fire and police engaged in a firefight with the armed men, shooting 5 but sustaining 3 injuries of their own. 4 of the shot suspects died immediately, and another died in hospital. Another 4 suspects were taken into custody. Memtili Tilawaldi and Tursun Hassan, 2 Uyghur men who had warrants for their arrest issued, were fatally shot by police one day later in a cornfield on the outskirts of Kashgar. Attribution. The Chinese government is investigating the cause of the violence, and it did not offer an immediate explanation as for the attackers' motives. However, state media confirmed that all the suspected attackers were Uyghur, and an initial investigation from the Kashgar government concluded that the attacks on both days were related and that the perpetrators were recruited in Pakistan and gained explosives and firearms training at Atom bases in Pakistan along with Taliban and Al-Qaeda groups. The suspects, some of whom openly confessed to an Atom connection, were reportedly influenced by jihadist ideology. Terrorism expert Rowan Gunaratne said that the violence could either be conducted or influenced by the East Turkestan Islamic movement, although he said the movement had been weakened by Pakistani counter-terror operations from 2003. Which included Atom leaders like Hassan Marzam and Abdul Haq al-Turkestani being killed. Reactions. Chinese state media condemned both days' attacks as terrorist, followed by the government of Pakistan, which said that all incidents of terrorism are deplorable, and promised full cooperation with China against Atom. Chinese President Hu Jintao called Pakistani President Asif Ali Zardari to discuss ETIM's activities before holding the upcoming China-Eurasia Expo in September, while the chief of the Inter-Services Intelligence left for Beijing to address Chinese concerns. The Pakistan Army announced that it would continue operations against Atom, although some analysts doubt the strength of the Pakistani government in controlling terrorism. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council issued a terror alert to travelers in Xinjiang, citing the attack's increased seriousness above the 2011 Houthi attack because they targeted innocent civilians rather than security forces. Dilhadi Rexati, a representative from the pro-Uyghur Independence World Uyghur Congress, explained the attacks as a matter of Uyghurs having no peaceful way to oppose the Chinese government, so some have taken to extreme measures. He also alleged that martial law had been declared in the city, but Reuters reported that it was not possible to determine if an actual order for martial law had been issued. Rebia Kader, also of the WUC, said, "I cannot blame the Uyghurs who carry out such attacks, for they have been pushed to despair by Chinese policies." She also unfavorably compared the Chinese authorities' killing of Tilawaldi and Hassan to the Norwegian authorities' leniency towards the perpetrator of the 2011 Norway attacks. Aftermath. The city was reported to have virtually shut down immediately after the attacks. As Uyghur shops closed down for Ramadan and Han shops closed and Han people stayed indoors out of fear, tour groups scheduled to arrive at Kashgar were rerouted to Karnas Lake in northern Xinjiang. Riot police were deployed to the city and security checkpoints were established in the city center. Authorities tried to stem the spread of insightful rumors, including by deleting blog posts from residents. Around 200 Han people protested the loss of innocent lives on the streets of Kashgar on August 1. Most of the victims were also Han. Governor of Xinjiang Nur Bekri visited Kashgar that same day, pledging to punish the attackers, and the Kashgar and Xinjiang governments established a fund to pay for the medical treatment of survivors. Prayers at the Aqsa Mosque proceeded as usual, where religious leaders from the Islamic Association of China characterized the attacks as un-Islamic and pledged to offer Muslims new interpretations of Islamic texts that did not lend themselves to extremism. The Communist Party of China hosted an emergency anti-terrorism work conference in Urumqi at which Zhang Chengxian, the Xinjiang CPC party chief, resolved to crack down on religious extremist forces, saying that terrorist attackers are the common enemies of all ethnic groups. Minister of Public Security Meng Jianzhu added that, in addition to a crackdown, the government will address the social grievances that can lead to terrorism by expanding compulsory education and community development efforts. Except for those closed for Ramadan, businesses in the city reopened on August 4. On August 13, the elite counter-terrorist Snow Leopard Commando unit was deployed to Hotan and Kashgar to secure the cities ahead of the China-Eurasia Expo in September. On September 8, the US-based terrorist monitoring group SITE reported on a video made by ETM leader Abdul Shakur Damla claiming responsibility for the July Hotan and Kashgar attacks on behalf of his group. Damla confirmed that one of the perpetrators shot by police, Tyler Waldy, prepared for the attacks in an ETM training camp in Pakistan. On September 14, the Xinjiang Legal Daily reported that 6 men were tried for their involvement in the Hotan and Kashgar attacks. 4 were given death sentences, and 2 were given 19-year jail terms, for charges including leading and organizing a terror group, manufacturing illegal explosives, intentional homicide, and arson. Xinjiang authorities have unveiled a package of policy responses to the attacks to placate Muslim Uyghurs, which include increasing quotas for Uyghur participation in local government and increasing government subsidies for religious schools.